caught in the crossfire. Was caught in the
What's up, guys? Lance, the Obscure Movie Guy, coming to you once again, bringing you another fun-filled, fact-filled video on TV shows and movies that you don't give a crap about, and that's okay. Because today's episode is going to be specifically targeting a old TV show that I actually didn't watch when I was a kid, but I have since watched it, and I'm going to call this series in Rearview. Kind of like a series in review, but it's going to be about a TV series that is long in everyone's rear view mirror, and they probably won't be ever watching again. But I popped across this series on Tubi, and I thought to myself, I remember that show from when I was a kid. I remember seeing the advertisements and the commercials for it, but I never actually sat down and watched it because it seemed ridiculous to me. And it really is a ridiculous premise. But it lasted 5 seasons, and it is called Pacific Blue. And it comes from a glorious time in the late 1990s. Ran from April of 96 or... It was March of 96 to April of 2000. Ran 5 seasons, lasted like 100 episodes. But I remember seeing the promos for this as a kid, and I thought to myself, this seems like a ridiculous show that I probably wouldn't watch. And as I've gotten older, let's face it, my generation, we're very nostalgic for the 80s and the 90s. And I came across it, and I was like, you know what? I have got to check this out and see what it's about. And man, you want to talk about some nostalgia, it takes you back to a glorious time in the late 1990s. It originally premiered on the USA Network, which as a kid was one of my favorite networks. USA Network in the late 90s was an amazing TV channel. They had American Gladiator marathons during the summer. They had USA actually were showing boxing, live boxing. That was a big thing for them. You can actually see some of that, back in Rocky IV. USA Network was one of the plugs in the movie for the American audience to watch Rocky IV. Not to mention the infamous USA Up All Night. If you're not familiar with USA Up All Night, that was an amazing series that ran from 1989 to 1998. Gilbert Gottfried, kind of like an Elvira type thing, stupid skits, short intervenes in between a movie, but the movies that they played, sexploitation at its finest. That's where you could catch some of the greatest works in B movies, such as Sex and the Single Alien, Bikini Car Wash Company, and Bikini Car Wash Company 2, and The Naked Truth. The 1992 film starring Brian Thompson, not the television show starring Tia Leone. But regardless of all that, USA Network was getting into doing their own types of TV shows, never to compete with the Big Three or / Big Four. But they had Silk Stalkings that they ran. They started dabbling with, I think, syndication for Baywatch. And then they came up with this idea for Pacific Blue, about a bunch of bike cops. And when I mean bike cops, I mean bicycle cops. So let's check this out. Pacific Blue is an American crime drama series about a team of police officers with the Santa Monica Police Department who patrolled its beaches on bicycles. The show ran for 5 seasons on USA Network from March of 96 to April of 2000 with a total of 101 episodes. Often described as Baywatch on bikes, the series ran in many other countries and markets, including Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Egypt, France, Germany, Israel, Hungary, Italy, Norway, Poland, Russia, Spain, all the way to even Zimbabwe, if you can believe that. The series was created by Bill Nuss. It was executively produced by Gary Nardino, a producer and former president of Paramount Television. The production company was North Hall Productions, and it took its name respectively from Northwestern University and Seton Hall University, where Bill Nuss and Nardino attended college. Unfortunately, Nardino died in January of 1998, in which Nuss would become the sole chief showrunner and continue to use the North Hall Productions after Nardino's death. It was also co-executive produced by the E! Entertainment Television founders Alan Murfka, Marlon Vance, Rick Fallon, Richard C. Oakey, and John Moranville. Pacific Blue was filmed on location in Santa Monica Beach, Venice, Redondo Beach, Seal Beach, Huntington Beach, California, with the exception of 2 episodes in 1999 that were filmed in Hawaii. They were going to try and make a segue into Pacific Blue Hawaii, which never came to fruition. Executive producer Bill Nuss brought the show to Hawaii on the suggestion of April Massini, who had helped bring Baywatch to Hawaii in 1999. Season 1 consisted of 13 episodes and then was picked up for more episodes after that. Seasons 2 through 5 all had 22 episodes apiece, respectively, giving it a grand total of 101. Now, seasons 1 through 3, were really good. This show actually plays out kind of like 2 different series altogether. Seasons 1 through 3 had a very core cast built around the show, and then after season 3, heading into season 4, there was a huge restructuring of the show with completely different cast members, completely different story arcs, and a different tone to the show altogether. But let's concentrate on seasons 1 through 3, I should say, real quick. Seasons 1 through 3 had a core cast starring Jim Davidson as Officer T.C. Calloway, Darlene Vogel as Officer Chris Kelly, Paula Trickey as Officer Corey McNamara, Marcos Ferreras as Officer Victor Del Toro, and David Lander as Elvis Krasuski, who was the department's bike mechanic, and Rick Rossovich as the tough as nails but lovable and by-the-book Lieutenant Palermo. Now, immediately after season 1, David Lander would find himself in more of a guest spot role as opposed to a part of the main cast. He was kind of like a comedy relief type thing, and it didn't really work that well. It was kind of interesting that they did have a bike technician at the police department to maintain the bikes, which I'm sure is probably an actual thing, but I don't really know a whole lot about bike cops, and I'm not trying to take anything away from any police department, regardless of them riding a bike, riding a motorcycle, or a patrol car. But that was one of the main changes from season 1 heading into season 2. Other than that, the main cast itself stayed the same for the most part. Now, the story arced into season 2 and 3 with Officer TC and Officer Chris Kelly getting romantically involved with each other. They moved in together. Lieutenant Palermo, played by Rick Rossovich, who most notably has been in Top Gun. He was Sidewinder, for anybody who cares. Good actor. But his story arc consisted of him and his ex-wife being apart, getting back together. He's got to take care of his teenage daughter. She's rebellious. And then Victor Del Toro, who was involved in a shooting. All of those kind of coincided with each other the first few seasons. And then heading into the end of season 3, Lieutenant Palermo is going to take a leave of absence, a sabbatical, if you will, on the premise that he may or may not come back. Lo and behold, he does not come back. Victor Del Toro took time away after the police shooting that he was involved with, and he never really came back either. He did come back in an episode in season 4 to try and wrap up his storyline, but Victor Del Toro himself, the character, that was pretty much it for him. And then Calloway and Officer Kelly ended up getting married, and heading into season 4, they were kind of like what you would refer to, I guess they were like the veterans of the force at that point. But that was your core group for seasons 1 through 3, and then the show took a huge turn in storyline and execution heading into Season 4 and Season 5. The series underwent cast changes between the third and fourth seasons, which dramatically altered its tone. The events of the third season finale brought the departure of actors Marcos Ferreras and Rick Rossovich, that's Officer Del Toro and Lieutenant Palermo, with their characters retiring from the force prior to the fourth season premiere. Ferez would later return in a one-off guest appearance during the fourth season to wrap up his character's storyline. The fourth season premiere brought out 4 major cast additions, which was Shanna Moakler as Officer Monica Harper, Amy Hunter as Jamie Strickland, Jeff Stearns as Russ Granger, and then Mario Lopez as Bobby Cruz. These were the new recruits to the Pacific Blue unit and skewed the show's cast into a younger direction. Paula Trickey and Jim Davidson, who were officers T.C. Calloway and Chris Kelly, which would eventually become Lieutenant Calloway. They had previously played the roles. They were kind of like the show's original Young Guns, and then now they've been now they're more veteran focused, kind of like the old guard, and their characters took on a more of a leadership role within the Pacific Blue unit. In addition to this, those two characters, as I had said, they had become romantically involved. They were now married, heading into the fourth season. Vogel would later leave the series on a regular basis at the end of the season, but she returned in reoccurring appearances in Season 5, including the series finale. Now, the storylines for the fourth and fifth seasons emphasized undercover work and vice work. While these areas would normally fall out of the purview of a police unit like the Pacific Blue, the show always seemed to make some sort of effort and crazy explanation as to why the incident required them to be a part of the vice work episode by episode. And the changes can be credited with extending the life of the series for 2 additional seasons and made it the highest rated drama at the time on USA Network. The series had well over 2 million regular viewers, which was pretty good at the time, considering that you really, at the time, you couldn't advertise your show on another network. In USA, I think now that they're under CBS and Paramount, but at the time I don't think that they were a part of that. You couldn't really advertise on other cable networks, much less the big 3/the big 4, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. Now, as I've said, I really, really enjoyed this show, seasons 1 through 3. Seasons 4 and 5, with the new recruits and the younger blood, I didn't like the tone that it had set. I think the one shining thing from this was Mario Lopez, which obviously everybody knows as either Mario Lopez or A.C. Slater. But he played Officer Bobby Cruz, who I kind of like this character for Mario Lopez. He was really able to step away from that whole A.C. Slater good guy type image. And even though A.C. always kind of had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, he was able to play Bobby Cruz with a lot more, it was a lot more of an intense character for him. The guy not only had a chip on his shoulder, but he was quick to temper, got overheated real quickly a lot, and all of it for a good reason. But he was more of a rogue type cop in the beginning. He really wanted to, it was almost more like a vigilante type thing. But some of the storylines heading into seasons 4 and 5, they just, it's like it says, it's not really something that, vice work is not something that the bike unit would fall under, but they always found a way to try and incorporate it and explain it as to how they had to be a part of it. Now, I have a theory on this as to why the show took this edgier, younger, more attitude, if you will. And I think that's because at the same time, WWF/WWE was just in their infancy of the Attitude Era. And Monday Night Raw, which was originally Raw is War, was on USA Network. And I think even still is 30 years later. So I think they were trying to garner some of that Attitude Wrestling audience into this show, and that's why they came up with this new story arcs, kind of a little bit more edgier. Things kind of became a little bit more sexy, if you will, a little bit more exploited, if you will. in that regard. Now, it's always kind of been kind of like a Baywatch type on bikes is kind of what they always described it as, but never really played to it too well. And it wasn't until season 4 when the officers don't look like officers anymore. I mean, granted, seasons 1 through 3, the cast is attractive enough as it is, but you could still they still tried to look the part of an officer more than a model. And then seasons 4, it was looked more like a model than an officer. It was like a model in an officer's uniform. So it didn't bode well with me. And the show really does play out like two different series, but it's definitely worth the watch 1 through 3 for sure. 4 and 5 if you can stick around for it. But it was really popular at the time. Seasons 1 through 3 was a lot of fun because not only were they popular, but some of the guest stars that they had were you kind of had to be an insider into the bicycle world, if you will. But some of the guest stars that they had were pretty awesome, and it was pretty cool to see. Professional intense cycles, downhill racer April Lawyer performed bike stunts in a number of episodes. Trial rider Hans Ray performed tricks in each episode. But as it got more towards the Attitude Era, you would actually start to see some of the professional wrestling stars from WWF's Monday Night Raw be included into guest spots. Chyna, Triple H, Shawn Michaels was in a number of episodes. Not to mention with the Baywatch tie-in, Carmen Electra appeared as her role from Baywatch in an episode. Other guest stars, Shannon Tweed, Shannon Elizabeth, Adam West, Danny Bonaducci, Eric Estrada was in one. And so it kind of took on a different role. Now, for those not familiar with the bike industry, Hans Ray was actually a pretty big deal at the time. He was a GT Cycles professional rider, sponsorship from GT Cycles. And if you're not familiar with GT Cycles, man, the late 1990s, if you had a GT bike, you were in, man. I had one. I had a dyno comp. Everybody in the neighborhood had a dyno or a GT bike. GT Mach 1, dyno comp, dyno air. They were really good bikes. Originally started by a guy named Gary Turner, hence the GT. Ended up getting bought in with Schwinn, Mongoose, Dyno. Dyno was its own separate company back in the 80s. GT bought them, and then they ended up buying Schwinn and Mongoose. And even to this day, they still have the Mach 1s and some of the other dyno bikes. But yeah, that was a big thing in my neighborhood, man. Dyno bikes and GT bikes. Everybody seemed to have one. Jay, Dave, Chris, another guy named Lance. But really, really cool. And it's fun to watch a show like this when you grew up in the 90s with, a bike like that, and to see it being used, at least the company, having its own rider do some of the stunts. And that's another thing. These after season 1, this is kind of an interesting thing, but Trek provided the mountain bikes after season 1, and man, they were decked out with special bags, the lights, special shocks, E-light frames, jammed police bags, I think is what they were called. In the uniforms, the show's been attributed to providing a modern interpretation to a police biker's uniform. They were more form-fitting than I guess what bicycle cops were using at the time. But Trek's bikes heading into season 2, and they even make kind of like a note of that, like in the beginning of season 2, like they've got new bikes, they've got these new paint jobs, they've got these new police bags. Each bike was like $5,000 a piece, which at the time, that's a lot for any bicycle, but even at the time, that was way up there. And it's pretty cool. The show, in and of itself, it's kind of enthralling. You especially if you grew up in the era, and kids, if you want to get an idea of what it was like in the 90s and how ridiculous the styles were and how ridiculous some of the shows were, it's easy to get caught up in this show in its nostalgia as it is. And you look at it and you watch it and you think, man, what a time to be alive, whether you think it's a positive thing or a negative thing. But the show is kind of ridiculous sometimes. You almost forget that you're watching bike cops until there's a drive-by shooting from a gang on bicycles. It's, the Santa Monica Pier in the late 90s was not a place to be if you owned a bike, apparently. But really, guys, with so many shows available on streaming platforms anymore, I think what's irritating to me is that, and I'm going to use Netflix because I'm not a huge fan of Netflix, but Netflix comes out with a new show, it seems like every other week. They give you 10 episodes, and then they pull the plug. And I think what's most annoying about that from a Netflix... from somebody who's a subscriber to Netflix, is you don't really know like what their rating system is. Yeah, they do have like their top 10 of the week or top 10 in the US or whatever the case may be, but they don't give any like specific numbers like Nielsen ratings. You can look up Nielsen ratings on a specific TV show and be like, an average of, in this case, an average of 2 million people tuned in each week to watch the show. You don't get that with Netflix. You basically get a season. And if it's not lightning in a bottle, which we've talked about before, then they pulls the plug. And there's been a lot of really good shows that have been cut way too early. I mean, here's problem one. You're giving it a season. Now, network television, a season is usually at least 13 episodes. And if it does well, in some cases, they'll pick up another 10 or 9 or 11 episodes to give it a 22, 23 episode season 1. In this case, this one got 13 episodes. Now, this was originally a summer show. So most summer shows on network television usually are about 13 episodes, but it was so popular after the first season, they ran it from the summer into the fall and then some. But with Netflix, you're going to give it one season, you're going to get 8 to 10 episodes, and if you don't capture your lightning in a bottle in that little bit of time, then they don't give it another season. At least with something like this, I think kind of the fun thing about it is that it's a full series. It's completed. Yes, it's 20 years old at this point, 22 years old at this point. But you get a full series out of it. You don't get the disappointment of having to wait around and see if you're going to get another season. And even if you get another season, for the love of Pete, Netflix takes so long to make another season, you got to go back and watch the first season to begin with to see what the hell you missed. I mean, how long have we been waiting for season 4 of Stranger Things? For the love of shit, it's been like 3 years. The Witcher. Everybody loves season 1 and then season 2, and you blow through it in a day, and now you're going to wait another 18 months for season 3. At least with something like this, it's a series that's already been done. It's over with. You can go back, you can binge it, knock it out in a couple weeks, and at least be entertained enough, But I don't think stuff like Netflix, because the market is so saturated anymore, and I know I'm running long with this nonsense, but the market is so saturated that people have 20, 30 things on their watch list, and by the time they actually get around to watching something like Cowboy Bebop, they're going to love it, and then they're going to be like, oh, but they didn't do a second season. Or Daybreak. I've talked about Daybreak a couple of times. Great show. Only lasted a season. That's too bad, because that really had a lot of fun, and a lot of direction it could have gone heading into season 2. So, but guys, that's my take. That's my series in the rear view, if you will. Pacific Blue. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to do more of them in the future as far as a series review on some older stuff that I think people should watch. Check it out. Get a full series in. And like, subscribe, and comment to the YouTube channel. Share the video. Let me know what you guys think. Is there a series you want me to do a review on? An old one that you guys watched? Maybe something that flew under the radar with you when you were a kid, but now you watch it and you're like, damn, that was good. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.